Welcome to Series 3 of The Joy of Writing. I'm your host, Mark Carew, author of 3 novels, and someone who's interested in how other writers write, why they do it, and the fun or joy they get from their writing. In this episode, I'm talking with Tyler Keevil again. We talk about how he has viewed publication of his books over the years, the difficulties that some writers and creators have faced during COVID, and with regards to career goals, perhaps how, in the end, the only thing that matters is does the work last. So Tyler, Your Still Beating Heart was novel 4 and book 5, and of course you're very experienced with book launches in the pre-COVID era, and your book was launched 2 weeks ago. How did you find it compared to this time around with COVID going on?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's good to be back, and I think that's it's been tricky, to be honest. I think, as we all know, so much of the world has now moved into online virtual settings. That definitely translates to publication and to the book world. And for me, I really enjoy face-to-face events. I love doing readings with a live audience. And for example, with my previous book, No Good Brother, with Burrow, we even arranged a kind of mixed mode performance. I was trying to do something to shake things up in terms of the traditional literary reading, where you just read an extract, answer a few questions. My brother's a musician and filmmaker, and his music was really integral to the creation of the novel. I was listening to it throughout the writing process. And so when it came time to doing the launch for that, I said, well, you know what? John flew out, my brother flew out from Vancouver, and we did, maybe 10 modest gigs. I call them gigs. They were kind of readings mixed with his music and us kind of reading the dialogue as the brothers in the book, so kind of playing up to that aspect of the story in Wales in the southwest of England. And, that was brilliant. It was a lot of fun, and of course couldn't happen at all this time around. Or nothing similar could have happened. For starters, John probably wouldn't have been able to fly over from Canada, or it would have created all kinds of difficulties and challenges to overcome. And then, the idea of being with a live audience, we're moving back towards that now. So I recently judged a short story contest for the Gloucestershire Writers Network, and they're aiming to hold an event at Cheltenham Literature Festival.
Oh, good.
Shortly. But of course it won't be an event like we recall, and there'll be a lot more kind of restrictions and in terms of use of the space, etc. So I think faced with that, a lot of writers are still opting to do online launches and readings and interviews, which is great. And I've attended, a couple of those, and they can work really, really well. I saw Pondweed, another Myriad novel, or a short story collection launch online, and that was really exciting. I haven't necessarily done anything like that just yet, and I think as we progress kind of further into the year, I might look more towards either doing one of those online events or hoping to start doing a bit more in person, if that's feasible, because like I said, that's where I feel more comfortable, I think is the word,
Yes.
With an audience you can see and engage with and talk to.
Right. That makes sense. You work as a lecturer face to face, talking about and books, literature is obviously your thing. For novel 4, book 5, was it the same sort of thrill, or how did the thrill compare to the first debut work?
Yeah, it's a great question, a tough question. It's not too hard to think back though to Fireball, which was my debut novel.
Yeah.
And that was with Parthian. And I remember Rich Davies, the managing director of Parthian, come into that launch. It was part of a 4-book series of Bright Young Things with J.P. Smythe, James Smythe, Susie Wilde, and Will Gritton. And we were in Waterstones in Cardiff. And actually Rich put his hand up in our Q&A to ask, how does it actually feel? And he kind of was speaking from a much more jaded perspective. He said, I've been to loads of these events over the years, and how does it feel? And of course, we were much more, wide-eyed and excited about the process. But I also remember, I think Will said, it had already become intimidating being in Waterstones and seeing your book on the shelf and realizing, okay, I'm now part of that there's all these other books. And it's very humbling, I think, experience as well for a first-time author, because everything is building up to that moment of launching it. And then you realize it's out there amongst so many other great works from previous years, and also so many, overwhelmingly talented authors in the contemporary scene, the authors we love to read, essentially. So, in a way, not much has changed in that respect. I think you might be a bit more naive for a debut, or at least I was, with my first book, kind of expecting sales to just happen. Yeah. But again, that's a hard lesson that you realize, regardless of, we all like to think, that we're doing a good job and our book deserves to be read. But then you can also, you forgive the reader who goes in and has literally hundreds of thousands of books to choose from, or to order online or whatnot. How do you get attention to your own? So you become much more accepting of that fact, and also understanding that you do need to link up with readers, and that you need to find readers and hope that they find your work through various channels and various means. But it doesn't happen on its own. It's not like some kind of magic process. It's another kind of part of being an author. Is another part of the job is getting your work out there in ways that perhaps are suited to what you can do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, lots of ways of promoting your work, and we were talking beforehand. Now, authors mustn't regard promotion as a dirty word, because as you were saying, you weren't writing not to be read, as it were. You would like people to read your books, and what works best for you in the way of sort of promoting your writing?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I was saying with regards to launches, that I do like kind of having that direct engagement with an audience. I think it maybe suits as well the style of writing, and largely, especially with the novels, up until You're Still Beating Heart. I tend to rely, different in short fiction, I think, but on a first-person vernacular that you can read almost like as if the character is talking directly to an audience, with a kind of a monologue feel, if that makes sense. And I think that can work, and that kind of can, basically kind of the idea of operating in an oral tradition that can emerge. And one or two people have said, after hearing a reading, like, I'll actually be able to see the book in a different way now, or hear the book in a different way when I read, because I'll know how you say it. And obviously that might have something to do with, accents, and also if somebody's reading a book written by a Canadian, published in Britain, but not necessarily knowing some of the aspects of the, vernacular and the idiosyncrasies of how I speak. And that's kind of nice to hear, because I think, well, that's, then the act of communication is getting a bit crystallized or solidified. That's how that character might actually say the words, if that makes sense. That's always been a big part of being able to find readers and kind of get my work out there. And I should have said, I'm also, as you get older as a writer and have a slightly larger body of work, I guess, if that's the phrase, I'm grateful for anyone who does read the work, and also anyone who contacts you or connects with you about it, just to say, again, they have the choice of reading anything, and they've taken the time, and it is a time investment, when it's a lot easier to do something else these days, or find other forms of entertainment to read a novel, and to go through every word that you've read. That's something I don't take for granted, and I never really did, but definitely I think that's something that's changed as I've gotten a bit older as a writer.
Yes, I mean, you're really exemplifying the personal side to things there. The chance for a would-be reader to hear the author speak about their work, and to read, and as you say, characterize their characters and that's a very special thing. And then in return for the author to hear about a reader who really liked their work and found it very special and it spoke to them and they really got what you were trying to do, that is outstanding. I mean, there's nothing much to match that. Yeah,
no, absolutely. In a way, that's sometimes what that the old adage, or that's what makes it all worth it. And once or twice, some of the best kind of compliments for a piece of work come at you sideways. And I mean, recently, a colleague within the industry wrote to me just to say it wasn't to do with her appreciation of the work, but that she'd given it to someone she knew who isn't a big reader, and that they sent back a really positive response and said, "Oh, I hardly ever read books, and I really like this one.
Yeah,
what else would you recommend?" And I thought that's quite cool, especially in an era when you worry about reading and everyone. I don't necessarily worry about personally, but there's often the news about our attention spans and what's happening to the written word. I think that's actually gone back a little the other way recently, with people talking about in the COVID era, reading has reemerged.
Yes, absolutely.
Surge in book sales. So that's an interesting kind of knock-on or side effect of what has been going on.
So, I mean, as for connecting with readers, I mean, nothing much to beat face-to-face if they're there and can hear you. But then, of course, there is the giant of social media.
Yes.
Where many fledgling authors they sort of have this assumption that they need to build what is called an online following, whatever that looks like. And again, we were talking beforehand about this, and I think it's true that neither one of us is, completely sold on that idea. And it would be interesting to sort of figure out why that's not always the whole deal.
Yeah, I think, if I'm perfectly honest, I wish I was more adept in social media. But you can't, and you can learn, right? It's a skill, I'm assuming, that can be learned like other things, but it's not something that's come naturally to me, definitely. And I think often, and maybe that's the case with a lot of writers, that, we spend, I'll just, a very concrete example. It takes me a really long time just to write a single tweet. Because I look at the words, and as a writer, you start to edit the words, and that's just part of what we've trained ourselves to do. I know that definitely doesn't apply to all writers, and there's some writers who are exceptional and really engaging and entertaining on social media. And like I said, I wish I could do that. And maybe it'll get better as I get a bit more used to it. I'm still relatively new to Twitter, for example. I remember a really interesting story about the author of Artemis Fowl, Johan Colfer, series, and he does these amazing, it's not necessarily on social media, but he does these amazing road shows, kind of comedy road shows for children and family based around his books. And they asked him, how do you get so good at that? And he said, well, when it became evident to me that doing these kinds of events was going to be part and parcel of my job as author, I signed up, or I started studying stand-up comedy and and being able to present myself in that way. So maybe it's similar that, it's maybe social media, to transfer it to social media, maybe that's a learned skill, and you can kind of study it and get good at it in other ways. So yeah, maybe I'll move towards that. I do remember a student of mine, ex-student, Pam. I remember her well because she did, as a research project, she studied the effects of social media on sales. And, she was a mature student, accomplished writer in her own right. She was kind of basically interested in this same question, and about the impact of it, and does it actually translate to sales? And obviously, there's different sides to it, and it's a many multifaceted question. But one of the conclusions, at least of her research that she conducted for that essay, was that social media is really important for making connections, finding links with organizations, developing some reader following. But in terms of actual sales, the kind of face-to-face and those live events is still a more direct translation of getting your book into the hands of people for obvious reasons. But that social media can kind of lead into that, if that makes sense. I hope I'm kind of paraphrasing or summarizing her essay correctly. Pam can write to me if I got that wrong, but I think that was the gist of it. And in a way, when I heard that, I was a relief. I was like, oh, great, somebody's done the research, and that there's still room for an importance to those kind of live events that I'm more prone to.
Right. Oh, well, that's good. I'm doing a online book club next month, so okay. I mean, even though it's it will be face to face Zoom or something, but I think that would be more effective than many other ways of approaching it. You're on now, I suppose, writing the next book. Presumably, I presume that, although I do know, and we've been speaking about this, that lockdown has not been so easy for some creatives and some writers. How did that sort of impact you and your urge to carry on with the next book?
Yeah, this is fresh in my mind because I did a bit of Q&A for Myriad for their newsletter that they send out to readers to coincide with the launch of You're Still Beating Hard. And I mentioned in that it's been pretty tough. It's been a hard spring and summer for a couple of reasons. For us, we've kind of had a medical situation and family that coincided with, unrelated to COVID, but obviously COVID impacts on all aspects of all aspects of society, but also of NHS and access to the NHS and that kind of thing. And in addition, we've had the two kids, our 8-year-old and 5-year-old at home. So I said they'd asked that, what about the next book, or what's kind of coming up? And I said flat out, I haven't been able to develop new creative work during that period. So that's probably the longest stretch that I can recall, or pretty much since I started writing seriously 10 or 15 years ago. I did have the kind of concrete goal of working on the copy edits and liaising with my editor, Vicky. She's been brilliant, and they've been really supportive of me and of us throughout the whole process. So that kind of concrete, and in a way, I did feel capable of doing that aspect of writing. So rather than the generative creative, it was the editorial. Her specific comments on changes, and it was the kind of proofreading and those practical fine-tuning points I felt capable of doing. But I think it wasn't just to do with our situation. I think you're right that a lot of creative types have struggled throughout the lockdown, and you hear stories about that, and it could be partly to do with the home circumstances no longer being conducive to creativity.
To writing.
But I think you also said something interesting earlier about it also maybe has made quite a few of us reassess the goal and point and purpose of our art, and things seem much more serious now. In a certain extent, obviously, we all need laughter and escapism. Comedy's never going to go away, but the world is different, and it's not just COVID, it's the political scene, things going on, and when those kind of troubling things are going on, you kind of take a hard look at yourself and what you're doing, and you want to maybe make more of an impact, or you want to be able to be taking a stand and making changes, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So I think maybe, or wondering about the purpose of the craft, and I think it's equally hard for people in other areas. My wife works in theater, and that's really troubling in terms of what this means long term for theater practitioners, people in the entertainment industry, and I'm literally just talking about the practicalities of will we be able to get back to having a theater full of people and that performance space in the way that we knew, but in reaction to that, there's other exciting things happening. And of course, you jokingly said that we should be teaching university lectures in amphitheaters, or going back to the days of the Greeks. And maybe I'm sure there will be a lot more promenade theater, outdoor theater, making use of some of those great sites around the UK and elsewhere in the world, for sure.
Yeah, I think that the human species is extremely adaptable, and hopefully we can overcome all these many problems we're facing. And for writers thinking about writing their next book, I can see it's there's a lot of dark clouds above them, and you're just trying to find the sort of right idea that would make sense in this kind of situation and environment. And overall then, I mean, the next book is hard enough, always. But overall, for the aims of your writing career, do you have any sort of aims in, way markers that you need to personally hit, or is it a much more sort of I'll just do what comes to me sort of thing?
Yeah, I think in terms of career, I don't really have targets, goals in terms of big ambitions, but I do have ambitions in terms of the work and certain projects that you have kept with you for some time, that you would feel you'd let yourself down or you'd let other people down if you didn't fulfill them or achieve those, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally.
So I have a couple of projects, and they might maybe just what we're talking about, this idea of things seeming more serious, maybe that'll be the kind of signifier for me, or the impetus to get back to those projects that I've sometimes it's things that are so important you don't want to ruin them, and so you've held them at bay, or you've worked on them in small increments without fully committing, because you don't want to write it in the wrong way, or the stakes are too high or something like that. So maybe it'll be a matter of that coming back and going to those projects that you say, you'd be disappointed if your career came to an end and you hadn't finished those.
Yes, I know what you mean. There's big important ideas floating around which you every now and then you sort of examine and go, well, I'm probably not ready to write that yet. Yeah. It's that type of thing. But then, like you say, well, it would be a massive shame if I never wrote it. So someday that's got to happen. But for example, it's not career goals like, I mean, I don't know how personally driven you are by, the idea of fame and success and riches and all the rest of it, and winning prizes and all of that. Or is it more a case of just write the best darn book you can?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a tricky one. I think all of us, from a practitioner's point of view, there's a right answer to that question when you'd say it's all about work. It's only about work. But at the same time, we like you said earlier, we're writing to reach an audience. And more sales doesn't just mean, a bit more money and higher royalties or something. It means that more people are interested in your work and you're reaching more people. Yeah. And if writing is an act of communication, then you're communicating with more people, right? So you'd love to maybe reach a wider audience, and awards can help with that. And I think there's a wonderful interview with the French-Canadian filmmaker Denis Arcand, who made several kind of classics of Canadian cinema, Jesus of Montreal, the Barbarian Invasions, and the Rise and Fall of the American Empire. I think kind of some of the big ones. And it was after he won the Academy Award, I think, for the Barbarian Invasions. And they asked him, has this made a massive difference to your career? And he said, it was just lovely and casual, his reply. He was like, well, I would rather win an award than not win an award. Yeah. But in the end, the only thing that really matters is the work and the longevity. I think he used the word kind of about whether your work lasts. Yes, is important. I thought, that was a cool answer, and an interesting thing to say. And I think partly that award came to him quite late in his career, so he was, not going to be overwhelmed by this kind of success and everyone telling him he'd made it when he'd made all these brilliant films before that, and now just he was getting some spotlight because of the Academy Award, if that makes sense. So I've always remembered that interview, and I kind of keep that to heart as well. That the successes are really wonderful when they happen. Try not to let them sidetrack you or get in the way of what you're doing or what you want to do with your own writing.
Well, it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you, Tyler, over 3 episodes. I've learnt a great deal. Thank you so much for taking part, and best of luck to you.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's been great chatting with you the past 3 episodes.
My thanks to Tyler and all my guests for their insight into the writing life. Stay tuned for more from The Joy of Writing in the next series. You can leave feedback on any of the episodes at podchaser.com/The Joy of Writing, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.